Welcome back to Life's Chillin'. My name is Avital, and this week's Parshat is Parshat Vayishlach. Parshat Vayishlach really centers around the reunion story of Jacob and his brother Esav. As you might remember, Jacob had to flee from his home, from his birthplace, from his parents' house. He had to flee because he in an exchange, he ended up with the blessing that was initially intended for his brother Esav from their father Isaac, and Esav wanted to kill Jacob. And so Jacob had to flee. And while he's gone, he is able to get married. He has wives now, and he has had all of these children. And so a lot has changed. He's grown up. They're, fully adults now. And Jacob has decided to return to his birthplace, to his sort of homeland. And there's a lot that goes into this story. But what I really wanted to focus on is an interesting interaction that we see between Jacob and a man the man who's unnamed in this Parsha. What the Torah tells us is that Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the break of dawn. So Jacob is wrestling with this man, and the man, he can't overcome Jacob. The Torah tells us that Jacob is stronger, basically. And they fight all the way until dawn, at which point the man says, quote, "Let me go, for dawn has broken." So it's a very strange interaction that sort of Jacob is alone and he encounters this man who is unidentified, and they wrestle all the way until the break of dawn. And then the man who's wrestling with him asks, "Let me go. I don't want to, I'm done with this," when he was the one who really had started it. And so there's a lot of commentary on it, and I'm not going to get into all of the details on it because it's not the focus of the video today, but most of the commentators agree that the man who wrestled with Jacob was really an angel. And he had to leave at dawn because he had to return sort of to heaven to take his part in sort of praising God. It was kind of his turn back up in heaven, and so he needed to leave. But before this angel man leaves, the angel says, "No longer will it be said that your name is Jacob, but Israel. For you have striven with the divine and with man and have overcome." So it's interesting because Jacob has been called Jacob this whole time, and now we're getting to this name Israel. Now, Jacob is the father of the 12 tribes, and those 12 tribes make up the people of Israel, the Jewish people, the nation. And as we all know, we have a country now named Israel, and it's sort of the Jewish homeland. And so Israel, this is sort of our first mention of the name Israel, and it's going to go on to have this great legacy. So it's interesting to look at this first reference to it. The name Israel means sort of to prevail, or to prevail the divine. So basically that you had this wrestling, this fight, and you prevailed. And so it's a really fitting and interesting name. But you'd kind of think the name that is going to become the name of sort of related to the Jewish people would be something maybe like love God, or, servants of God, or, something more evocative of the love relationship that we have with God, or his kindness, or his mercy, or that we're his people. But the name that ends up being the name associated with the Jewish people is sort of struggle with the divine. So I think that's very interesting. And, you could say, well, it was just the angel who had come up with this name. But later in the Parsha, God himself gives this name to Jacob. God says to him, "Your name is Jacob. Your name shall not always be called Jacob, but Israel shall be your name." Then he called his name Israel. And so what the commentators say on that actually is that Jacob would be the name that is used throughout the Torah when it's referred to physical or mundane activities, but when it's anything spiritual, the name Israel is used. So it's the spiritual identity of Jacob, and further in the future of the Jewish people. So it's interesting, again, this name struggle with God, because Jacob had struggled. It was destined at his birth that his brother Esav would be the one to receive the birthright, the blessing of the firstborn son, who would sort of take on this legacy of the Jewish people, of his father, of Isaac. And yet, Jacob had wanted it. He wanted it so badly, and he had to struggle and fight, and to the point where his brother wanted to kill him and his parents told him to leave. He had to endure so much to fight to have the choice of leading the Jewish people. And it's interesting because I was reading Rabbi David Foreman's book about about the book of Bereshit, and in his book he says that it's interesting because Jacob is the only leader of the Jewish people who chose the role for himself. When you look at somebody like Moses, who's considered the greatest leader of all time, God chose Moses. Moses didn't want to be in that position. In fact, he argued with God multiple times saying, like, why me? Kind of don't pick me, pick somebody else. Moses didn't really want that position. It was something God assigned to him. Or if you look at, another leader, Joseph. Joseph ended up becoming viceroy over Egypt, but he was a Jewish leader. And it fell into place. It wasn't something that he sought out to be. But here, Jacob, this is what he wanted. He chose this, and it wasn't easy for him. He lost a lot along the way. He had to fight literally with this sort of angel being, but he had to fight to get to this place. He had to fight with his brother, to fight with his family. He had to constantly struggle to get to this point. So you could say that struggling for our faith is something built into our DNA. And when you look at Jewish history, the Jewish people are people who have struggled. We have struggled for our faith. We have struggled to have a relationship with God. We have struggled to be able to publicly show that we're Jewish and not to be afraid. Our history is filled with so much struggle. And so I feel like the name Israel is actually so fitting, and it's such a perfect name to describe not only the nature of we've had to fight for our faith and fight for the right to practice our faith, but on a smaller level, on a more personal level, faith is not something that's always easy. It's not always easy to proudly show our Judaism. It's not always easy to feel like we have a connection with God. It's not always easy, even if we know Jewish law, to follow and practice Jewish law. It's not always easy if we decide to pray every day that you're going to feel connected to those prayers. Faith in general is something that centers around a struggle and a fight to keep going even when it's difficult. And so I think that we should all feel so much comfort when we think about Jacob and his name change to Israel, and Israel being the name of our homeland and, the Israelites, the Jewish people, that name means struggle with God because that's normal, and it's exactly the way that we were designed. It's what we were designed to do all the way back to the inception of the name. We were designed to have this struggle with God and to keep fighting, but the name also means that we prevail in the end. We have these battles, these internal or external battles, and we will always come out victorious in time. And so again, I hope we can all take comfort in the fact that the struggle is absolutely normal and it is okay, and it's in fact celebrated because that is the name of that was chosen for us, Israel. And I hope you all have a wonderful week and a Shabbat Shalom, and I look forward to speaking with you next time.